Whiskey
Tango
Life Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Whiskey Tango Life Podcast. I am your host, Chris. We've been centering this season around doing interviews with people that live out experiences around hot political topics and everything. And we've had a couple really great interviews already this year. And I'm so excited because this interview, I've actually been talking to her for months now. And I was about ready to record an interview with her last December. And unfortunately, my mother passed away, but it was a whole big thing that was going on at that time. Had to push it off. That's why things have kind of been on hold anyway. And we just started the season back up this week by relaunching with the first episode. But I'm so excited because I've known about her for a while. She's known my wife for a little while. And she is in the public sphere of talking about abortion and being a pro-life activist and everything. So I want to welcome Toni McFadden. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. So let's start off. It's kind of like I said to you before we got started. I just want to hear your story, you know? Mm-hmm. Why don't you bring me through, because I really want to focus the core of our interview today on the pro-life issue, being a pro-life activist and everything. Mm-hmm. I want to hear how you came to be a pro-life activist and what your life experiences are that led you down the path, not only to have the stance of being pro-life, but what led you to put yourself out there in the public sphere to actually be the advocate that you are?
Well, I wasn't always pro-life. I have gone through an abortion myself. I was a senior in high school when I was dating a guy off and on for 2 years. Wasn't the best relationship, but didn't really understand what abortion was. Like, I knew what it was, but I just never thought I would end up in that kind of situation. I don't think any teenager does. But I was very early on, about 7 weeks. So I was given the chemical abortion, which is something that is very heated right now that people are talking about, because the FDA just approved that you can give these pills to girls without them seeing a doctor, just through the mail. You can purchase them now. When I had to go in to an abortion clinic similar to Planned Parenthood, I had to get an ultrasound so that they would make sure I was pregnant before they gave me anything. So they also made me wait 4 weeks to make sure I was pregnant. And then when I went into the facility, they did an ultrasound. Knowing what I know now, it's very deceptive. The screen was faced away from me when I was having the ultrasound. And for some reason, I asked the nurse if I could see the screen, and she was very hesitant to show me. But eventually she did turn it around, and before I could say anything, she said, "See, it's nothing. It's just the size of a pea." Now, at my age, I had no idea about fetal development. And, you know, the internet is not what we have now. So it's not like I could just Google it and just see everything. I just thought, you should be able to trust a nurse and a doctor to tell you the truth. And I have this nurse who is an adult telling me, "See, it's not a baby yet." That's basically what she was trying to tell me. It's nothing. You're early along. It's not a big deal. So I was given the RU486 pills. Just for your listeners to know, they have what's called the abortion pill reversal right now, that if you take the first set of pills and a girl regrets it, she can get onto the website and go on to abortionpillreversal.com, get a doctor who will be able to give her either an injection of progesterone, or she could take a pill form, and so that the baby will attach again to her uterus. Because that's what happens. When you take the first set of pills, it basically blocks the hormone progesterone. The baby detaches from the uterus, so it's no longer getting blood flow or nourishment from the mother, and then the baby dies by starving to death. And then 24 to 48 hours later, I was told to take a second set of pills in the comfort of my home, which is actually very traumatic, because what they say to you is, You're just going to have some heavy bleeding, like a little bit heavier than your normal cycle. And basically what you're doing though is expelling the pregnancy by yourself. And teenagers are doing this, and it's traumatic because you're the one taking the pills. So it's not like a doctor is putting you to sleep and performing an abortion on you. You're doing this yourself. So, not to give every single detail because I could go through all of that, but I had regret right away after I took the first set of pills. And my boyfriend and my best friend were the ones who really encouraged me to have the abortion. They came with me to the abortion clinic, and my boyfriend actually broke up with me the day after he came to the abortion clinic with me. So when people say that guys shouldn't be able to have a voice in this, what they're doing is allowing them to be irresponsible. That I could get a girl pregnant and I could just walk away because I don't have to deal with it anymore. It's your body, it's your choice, even though half the baby is yours too. It's your DNA as well. So not only as a teenager, am I about to graduate, my boyfriend breaks up with me. I take the pills that actually did not work. I took both set of pills and I had some bleeding, but not enough that I thought anything happened. And 2 months later is when I started severely hemorrhaging. And I didn't even know what hemorrhaging was. This is how uneducated I was at the time, and had no idea what was going on, but realized afterwards, like, oh, this was what was supposed to happen 2 months ago. And my mom came and picked me up from school. I had pain so bad I could barely walk. I didn't tell her. And I just went upstairs, went in the bathroom. I was in the bathroom for hours. And I couldn't even tell you when the pain went away. Like, it had to be a couple of days. And if anyone has ever seen the movie Unplanned with Abby Johnson, it is very similar to that of what I went through. And no one can prepare you for that kind of trauma that you're going to go through. But I was not a Christian either. I did not have any like moral compass, at the time. I'm just kind of just trying to survive. And when you're just trying to survive, you stuff things down to try to move on with life. And that's pretty much what I did for a few years until I became a Christian about 3.5 years later while I was in college through through a ministry called Campus Crusade for Christ, which is a pretty popular ministry on college campuses. And it really wasn't until 3 years after I became a Christian that I even talked about the fact that I had an abortion, because I thought that was the one thing Christians weren't going to forgive me for, because I had only heard it talked about either with, you're a murderer, you're this, or I didn't hear it talked about at all, or it came up on Sanctity of Human Life Sunday, but it was just highlighting what the local pregnancy centers were doing and never really touched on the post-abortive woman who is sitting in your pews who have the guilt and the shame and don't want to talk about it. So I kind of was just like, well, I know God's forgiven me and I'm just going to keep it between us and and not really say anything about it. But, we serve a God that is too good to keep us where we're at. And he brought some people in my life that basically broke down that lie that I couldn't tell other Christians. And when I did that, I met a girl who worked for Crisis Pregnancy Center, who spoke in schools on saving sex for marriage. And that was something that I was really interested in doing because I was living that out for the first time in my life, and had committed to saving myself for marriage because my worldview changed. Because when God stepped into my life, he showed me who he created me to be, that my past did not determine my future, but that I had to make different decisions than what I had made in my past. And marriage was something that I wanted, but I wasn't sure when that would come. And so I thought my actions need to display to my future spouse that I've been thinking about them long before I ever meet them. And so hearing her story and hear what she was going through, or hearing what she did, she was the first person I told that I had had an abortion. And instead of thinking or receiving judgment, she just bawled her eyes out, because she's like, do you know how many women need to hear your story, and how much freedom you're going to give them because of what God has done for you? They need that too. So I started speaking in schools, and I actually became the director of this program as well. And in the Philadelphia area, I was in about 50 schools, and I did middle schools, high schools, and colleges, and shared my story all the time, year after year. I mean, we spoke to so many kids, and just really exposing the lies that the culture is feeding them when it comes to sex and relationships. And that's where my program, Relationships Matter, comes from as well. And so through that, and here's the beauty of what God does, is that he doesn't waste anything. And the same guy that I had the abortion with actually came back almost 9 years later. We had not run into each other. We hadn't seen each other, but he had become a Christian. And the Lord put me on his heart as someone he needed to go back to and apologize to. And so I remember deciding to meet with him, and face to face, because he said he didn't want to do it over, the internet and over Facebook, because that's where he found me. He would rather do it face to face. And so he said to me something that I hadn't really thought about. And he said the reason he left the relationship was because it was easier for him to leave the relationship than to have to face the fact that we ended the life of our child. And what I realized in that moment was that abortion does not just affect women, it does affect men, because God has called them to be protectors and leaders. And what he realized is not only did he not protect me, but he didn't protect his own child. And the only God could have put that on his heart to, want to confront that and apologize to that. And so less than a year later, I actually became his wife. So we're married now.
So I knew that you were married. I didn't know that was him. Okay, yep, that's awesome.
Wow. So we just celebrated 12 years of marriage. And on our wedding day, we were able to honor our unborn baby. I had gone through post-abortion counseling before he had come along, and I had had a memorial service for the baby. And the Lord had showed me through a dream that I would have had a boy. So at our wedding, we wrote our story and then said that we were lighting an extra candle to acknowledge the life of our child, because we believe that every time we share our story, that our child is no longer a statistic, but is helping others to choose life or to heal if they've gone through an abortion. So all of that, plus learning what abortion is, the different procedures, and then learning the history of Planned Parenthood and their racist roots, is why I unapologetically will speak out against abortion on my platforms, will speak boldly about it in front of people, not in a way to be hurtful to people, but to expose the evil and just the injustice that's being done to our most vulnerable in society. So that's why I'm a pro-life activist, because I believe that every child should have the right to life, should have the basic right to be able to live no matter the circumstance of where they're coming from. And I think because of my own story, I always have grace and compassion, because I know what it is to walk in lies and not see the truth. So when I am facing a girl who's gone through it, I can have that compassion for her. But for those who are just trying to blindly just say, oh, it's just a bunch of cells, I could speak to those things because I know it's not true. And so it's a fine line to walk. But I know what I've been saved from. And, I know only God could have done that. And so this is my calling. This is my purpose. This is why I think he put me on this earth. And so I unapologetically will do this until abortion is abolished and every child is able to be born. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm still sitting here as a big lump of cells myself. You know what I mean?
Right? So. Me too.
You hit on like 50 things I want to talk about just within that story. I thought I would be ready to talk about specifically someone that I know, but I don't feel like I can yet by naming them. I'll just say this. I have a family member who a long time ago had an abortion. And what she had said to me was, could you imagine what my father would have said to me if he had known that at 18 or it was something, she was a teenager, what my father would have said to me if he had found out. Okay. The crazy thing about this story, and this is, I think, this is an amazing history of my family, right? Is that her father was born of a rape situation and his mother chose not to abort him. And when she said that to me, could you imagine what my father would have said to me? I said to her, you mean your father who was a product of a rape, what he would have said to you? And she said, wow, I never thought of it that way, you know? And that moment right there turned her around from being, I'm against abortion, but I kind of get why people do it, to speaking out against abortion. And not as publicly as maybe like you or I would go in front of people and say things, but in private at least, changed her heart. I guess if you don't mind sharing, your parents obviously knew at some point what had happened, right? And you were mentioning that you were kind of hiding it from them at first and everything. What was the reaction, and was it what you expected, I guess?
Well, I told them when I decided to work for this crisis pregnancy center, because I was like, I can't go and talk to all these teenagers before I go and share this with my parents. And I think what was hurtful about it, no, they reacted fine from it because they had seen my life change. I think what was hurtful by it is how deeply how deceptive the pro-abortion side is of saying you can't tell your parents. Like, you're right, you can't tell them. When my parents said, yeah, it would have been hard. That would have been so difficult because I was known as like the good one in my family. So that label, they would never have expected it, but they said they would have never have wanted me to have an abortion. Like, they would have helped me. So the fact that I believed the lie that I couldn't go to my parents, which is what Planned Parenthood wants kids to believe. That's why they groom them now, because they're in our schools. Like, they're grooming them now so that so the kids don't go to their parents, so they go to them instead. And so that they can make money on abortions. Like, they know what they're doing. So it was difficult to hear that from my parents, knowing that my outcome could have been completely different. And it was hurtful for my mom because she was like, I can't believe I had no idea what was happening right under my own roof. Like, how did I not see or pick up that you were going through any of this? So she had to deal with a lot of guilt in that, So just the deception of it. And I just remember when I called this abortion clinic, they gave me a different name. Now I'm aging myself because we didn't have like cell phones then. So they were like, we'll give you a new name. So to remind you of your appointment, if we call your house and one of your parents pick up, we'll say this name so that you know that it's us calling. I mean, how deceptive is that? But they're making teenagers think we care about you. And so we're willing to lie for you in order so you can, have this abortion.
So that leads into one of the other questions that kind of came to my mind immediately, which is, I know what my experience was in public schools when I was going through health education and everything, on what they said abortion was, talking about sexual activities, how they talked about sex, how they talked about STDs, how they talked about pregnancy, how even if you switch over to the biology classes, how they talked about, I remember specifically one of my biology teachers putting up like 3 or 4 pictures of fetuses, one from a human, one from each other type of animal and everything, and saying, see, there's really no difference between these things, to almost desensitize you that it's nothing until it comes out. Like you like, there's a chance that you're going to give birth to a giraffe or something like that, It's so ridiculous. So I guess I only know my experience in a country school. I mean, they were teaching this stuff in a country school. Okay. Right. What were you seeing? Was abortion just another means of conception the way they were teaching it in your school, like they did in mine?
I don't even remember learning about abortion in school. I just think they lowered the standard of, you're all going to have sex anyway. So, abstinence, all right, yeah, okay. But you're all going to do it anyway. So let me teach you how to use condoms. So I just remember that. I don't even remember learning about abortion at all in school. But there was this, there was no standard. There was no high standard that marriage is possible. And, none of that. It was just like, this is probably what you're going to do. And a lot of my friends like myself, we were just learning from each other, which is horrible. Because we know just as much as each other. So you're just learning from what you see. And I would tell kids in the classroom all the time, I didn't have the best foundation laid out for me. I was brought up in a broken home, and I saw my dad go through multiple marriages. So I didn't really have a good picture of stability until after I became a Christian. I realized this is not what I want. And if it's not what I want, I have to make different decisions in order to not have that. But growing up, you just hope that you're going to have a good relationship, but no one's teaching these kids how to have healthy relationships. So when I would speak in the schools, and the health teachers would be like, oh yeah, I'll let you teach about abstinence because they're not going to listen to you. I'm speaking in schools in the city, and it's like pin drop. Because I'm not saying, oh, sex is bad, don't do it. I'm saying you bond with someone, your emotions and chemicals are released. You're bonding not just your body, but everything. And then you break up and you're just supposed to just move on with the next person. That is not normal. Society is trying to make that normal, but they're degrading you and just really giving them a picture of what the actions they're doing now is building who they're becoming as an adult. And if you go around just sleeping with everyone and then you want to get married, a ring on your finger isn't going to make you faithful, honest, and trustworthy all of a sudden. You have to build those things into you. And so a lot of them have just never heard that, because all they've seen is broken families. And then we look at society today, they're being even more confusing to them, telling girls they could be boys and boys they could be girls, and there's no difference. And it's so detrimental to society because we're breaking down the family system, and we can only be as healthy as our family systems are. So it's really fighting against a lot of things. It's not just abortion, but I think abortion is the root, because if we allow a mother to decide if she can kill her baby or not, that sets the tone for everything outside of the womb as well. And so I'm not surprised by the stuff that we see outside of the womb if we can't even care for our most vulnerable that haven't even left the womb yet.
Yep. If you can't even see the value of life within the womb, once it gets out of the womb, how can you respect it in a relationship or anything else? You're absolutely right.
You can't.
What's interesting is we just got done with a Bible study. I rushed home to do the interview, and we were specifically talking about this stuff tonight, and talking about Proverbs we were in, right? And the pastor said that when it comes to premarital sex, every partner that you have, you're giving a little bit of your soul away, and you're not giving your whole self to your eventual marriage partner then, and you're cheating them out of the whole you, basically, by the time you get there. And that's kind of like what you're saying. So one of the other things that you talked about, you were just touching upon it, was in regards to you getting into the schools right now, how you can hear a pin drop and everything. But I'm also interested in some of the positive outcomes, right? So, I mean, obviously you don't have to mention names, because even if you did, no one would know who they are. But do you ever hear from students that come up to you afterwards and say, oh my gosh, I had an abortion, or no one teaches us this stuff, and I've been afraid, people are pressuring me into sex, I'm not having sex, and now you've given me the confidence to wait until marriage and everything? I mean, like, what are some of the positive things you hear about when you get out of the school?
Yeah, they're like, you said the things that I didn't know how to articulate myself, that I was feeling these things, but I didn't know how to really walk them out. And that's the thing. They need tools. You can't just say, do this, like, you got to empower them. Like, this is not going to be easy either. You have to paint a reality that when you walk out of this room, when you turn on the TV, this is not what you are going to hear. Truth, you have to seek it out. Like, you can't, like, it's not just going to be handed to you. And for those who are in relationships, I always test them and say, if you're in a relationship right now and you want to see if it's based on true love or not, take anything physical you're doing, even if it's just holding hands, anything physical, out of the relationship. That's going to tell you if you're able to get together and actually communicate without touching physically or making out or whatever. And that's going to tell you what kind of foundation your relationship is built on. And so I've had girls who have come up to me and said they've had an abortion before, and I've had women who had abortions like 20, 30 years ago and had never told anyone before. And the crazy thing is, it's the same inside the church and outside the church, because the church doesn't talk about sex and relationships at all, or they just tell their kids, like, just don't do it. Sex is bad. You're getting an STD, like, and they don't explain.
The Lord's watching you.
Yeah. And they don't tell them why it's powerful to wait and why it's worth waiting for. They don't give them that beautiful picture of on your wedding day, you become like one, and then sex is an expression of what you just did with your lives a couple of hours ago. Become one with your lives, and then one through the expression of sex. But it's more than just about a feeling, but you're protected by a lifelong commitment. And that's powerful. And the way that our culture is degrading that is that outside of marriage, it's like you're marrying your bodies, but without your lives. So either person has the freedom to leave. Like, that's so degrading to you. That's degrading to your future spouse. And so a lot of the kids have just never heard why it's so attractive. And they always get like freaked out when I tell them, you know who's having the best sex? Religious women that are married to the same person. You know, it's not the person who's going from girl to girl to girl to girl, or from guy to guy to guy to guy, and, you know, having sex with whoever, whenever. That's not it. It's a person who knows all your flaws, is still committed to you, wakes up to you every single morning. You're doing life together. Life isn't about a feeling. Like, there's choices, and you have to choose to love the person as well. You're not always going to feel like it. And that's the other issue, is we live in a culture of just about feelings and acting based off of their feelings rather than on what is true. And that's why, as soon as things get difficult, you leave because you don't feel like being with the person anymore. So just that alone, and then telling them to surround themselves with people who are living this out. If you could surround yourself with people who are doing whatever they want with whoever they want, that's the way you're going to go. So even think about your friendships and think about boundaries in relationships. Don't think about boundaries when you're in the relationship. Think about them before. What are your boundaries? What kind of relationship do you want before you even enter into them? And write those things down, and don't settle. Don't lower your standard. And because if someone is making you do that, that's not saying they love you. If they're causing you or pressuring you to lower your standard. And I just remind them that when you set your standards high, you meet people who are setting their standards high too. Like, you have to be living that out too. You can't expect, like, a guy will be like, oh, I want to marry the girl that's a virgin. You're not going to get one if you're just doing whatever you want. That's not, normally you're not going to meet that. Like, you need to have that standard too. But I think it's also important, like I said, is reminding them that it's possible to start over. That you may have already had sex before. It doesn't mean that you can't have a good marriage, but you have to deal with what I call emotional baggage. And that's all the hurt and the pain and the distrust and thinking the other person is going to do exactly what people in the past have done to you, but they're not, but you're just, that's the emotional baggage of having sex outside of marriage. And so it's dealing with all of those things too. So you're a healthy person when you get into a marriage.
What's interesting for me personally is I was a virgin until my early 20s. And I think it's really hard at the time because of the pressure. You feel like you're being left out. Mm-hmm. I know that I set my standards pretty high, and I felt like because things weren't falling into place for me, that maybe I set my standards too high. Maybe I can't actually meet someone that can meet those standards.
Right.
And then your morals start falling apart. You start lowering the bar. And I can see how kids fall into that because I was someone that fell into that. But to your point about the best sex being in marriage and everything, and we sound like the icky ones because we're married and everything. But you're talking about the vulnerabilities and everything. Yeah. If you're comfortable with your partner and you know their flaws and they know your flaws, you're going to be more comfortable with them. And it comes down to comfortability, compatibility. Both of you in regards to us, like moving closer to Christ as a couple, like having the same goals and everything. What's fascinating to me, again, I'm not going to mention names on this, but it's a good example. Like it blows my mind. I was just telling my wife this last night, looking over one of my best friend's Instagram profiles and stuff, and very close to me. But this dude is one of those people that for years was arguing for marriage not having to be just between a man and a woman, right? Mm-hmm. Arguing against me as a friend, saying, what harm could it do? Like, I mean, love is love, blah, 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 right? Then when that went through, now he's married and they have an open marriage. And it's like, well, why are you even married?
Yeah.
It doesn't even make any sense. And I'm sitting here and she openly has a blog about having STDs and how they love each other and can get past this stuff. And I'm like, all I can think to myself as a conservative, I'm sorry if I'm going to bring politics into this for a second, is the free love of the 60s and stuff. Well, no wonder STDs exploded because everybody just was sleeping around with each other and it didn't mean anything, And this kind of stuff just blows my mind, how everything could get under such control if we just honored what marriage is and waited for it.
Right.
It's unbelievable.
Wow. I just can't even imagine being in a relationship that way. And do they have kids?
No, thank God. And to be honest with you, here's a scary thing. I didn't even know what to say to him at the time. I was out to dinner with him one time and I said, what if she gets pregnant? And he's like, we'll take care of it. And I was like, do I even ask him what that means? Does it mean that he'll step up as a man and raise that child? Or does it mean, no, we're totally okay with abortion. We'll just abort as many times as we possibly can. You know, what does that mean? I don't even know what to say to this guy because he lives in this bubble where he doesn't even like to talk to me as a good friend having opposing opinions. He doesn't like to hear my opposing opinions. He lives in this bubble. I love talking to people that have opposing opinions, not because I like to argue, but I do like to learn different perspectives and actually have conversations. Just amazing to me, but I'm way off topic. So I just want to get back to you and everything, but I do that. So let me see. Okay. So here's the other part to what you were actually talking about is how it affects people. This is something that is so left out of all the conversations out there. I think that it goes back to something I wanted to talk to you about too, about the feeling of the church and how the church feels. So let's talk about that next. Remind me. But the emotional impact of an abortion, right? So even though I learned about abortions in high school, it was that it's not really a life yet. You're just getting it out of the system. It's just a clump of cells, like you said earlier, and there's nothing to it. I have talked to multiple people that have had an abortion and the emotional scarring. One of them was a good family friend of ours who was in her 60s or 70s, who was a mentor. Her and her husband were mentors to us at our previous church that we went to. Good Christian couple, wanted to mentor us in our relationship and marriage and being just good, godly people. And she had an abortion when she was a teenager. And the emotional scarring that she felt to this day from that, even though she has come to Christ and does everything in the Lord's name, you don't hear about that from people. Yeah. You don't hear what happens to the person. And then, like you said, your husband now, what he was feeling at the time. Tell me a little bit more about some of the, I guess, mental anguish issues or side effects other than the physicality of an abortion, how that can affect people.
Well, there's the physical and there's the emotional. Well, I had dreams, I had nightmares. I would walk to work and there was a group of ladies that were outside of like a Planned Parenthood or one of they're just praying outside. And one of them handed me a pamphlet and it was an aborted baby. And it just like the triggers that happen when you're not ready to deal with things because you're just stuffing it down. And I think something spiritual happens, not in a good way, when you end the life of your child. Because it's not natural. It's not normal. They're trying to make it like it's natural and normal. And this is like, no big deal. But I've prayed outside of Planned Parenthoods before, and the girls look like death going in and they look like death coming out. No one's happy skipping into an abortion clinic. And I just remember when I went in feeling like this place, I could not wait to get out. Like there's so many girls there. It was a tiny place. It was horrible. Like you just did not feel comfortable there. So spiritually, it's just very demonic, I think, and just evil. Like when Roe versus Wade was passed in 1973, I think we let out a monster when we decided to let women decide if they would want to keep their babies alive or not. And then I think when things come up, you just want to push it down. You don't want to, like, even seeing a baby, you don't block it out or, and I think even after becoming a believer, until I started talking about it, I couldn't really receive healing. Like now I know there's no condemnation in Christ Jesus. I know Jesus' blood did what it was supposed to do. I know I have freedom in Christ. I will always have the regret, but I don't have the shame like I did when I wasn't in Christ, because he's lifted that. And I know that I'm a new creation. But I think that's the one thing even Christians struggle with is I know God's forgiven me, but I can't forgive myself. I get that all the time, women writing me because of that. And I think it's more of a rooted in Christ kind of thing. And that took me years to get to that place of knowing that when he sees me, he's not seeing the old me, he's seeing himself now because I'm covered. You know, that's what being justified means. Like he's taken my place and, you know, my past no longer defines me. And so I think because I also talk about it so much and I see the freedom it's given other women and releasing them from the bondage, because the enemy wants you to stay in bondage and he wants this to be a secret. Even though it's legal, girls are walking around with this secret and it causes depression. I know I drank way more after it than beforehand. I didn't realize that that's what I was doing to cope with it, but I drank way more. My lifestyle was insane afterwards because I thought, this is the first guy I was ever with. This is how it ended. Oh, well, like, it doesn't matter. So I became more promiscuous than I was before because you just think, oh, well, like, it's not worth it anymore. And you hate yourself. Like you honestly, I did not like myself at all. And when God stepped into my life, that was the first time I had to like literally look in the mirror and face my stuff. And people don't want to take personal responsibility. Our culture is so bad at that. Blame shift constantly. And the reason I believe I'm free is because I've owned what I've done. Like, I was the one who swallowed the pills. I was like, I could blame my upbringing. I can blame my now husband, boyfriend at the time. I could blame so many different things, but it was like, I had to take ownership for what I did. And I think that's why I was really set free from that. And I think that's a hard thing to do. So I think that's why a lot of women are still in that battle ground.
I think when we talk about the church, and this is again hearkening back to your original story there, a lot of people are afraid to bring it up at the church. I think that there's a lot of people that are afraid of going to church because of that experience that they had. And I think we need to, as Christians, do a better job of approaching all these topics with open arms and a heart for these people. Because find me a congregation where everyone in that congregation isn't a sinner in some sort of way. Right? We all come as sinners. I mean, that's why we're there. You know, we're there for the forgiveness of those sins. But the only thing that and again, I think that this comes back to Satan's use of his tools, and I'm not saying all in the media and everything, but the only thing that people see in the media of churches is like Westboro Baptist people. Right. People like you're talking about with standing outside with the fetus signs and all bloodied and everything, and calling you a murderer instead of approaching you. I've always said, I actually had a pretty in-depth conversation, couldn't change her mind at all, with someone who was leaning that Westboro Baptist way. It was a different kind of church, crazy church, I will say. And they did this in-your-face stuff saying you're going to hell and like just militaristic, okay? Is that the word? Yeah, whatever. But essentially like just batting you over the head with this, what you're doing is wrong, right? And I said to her, put the signs down. Set up a table, make some coffee, and say, sit down and talk to me. Just talk to me about what you're doing. Let me tell you why I think that you shouldn't do that. how much more of a difference could you make with that instead of yelling and screaming at someone?
Yeah, it's not helpful. And prayer is so powerful. People don't understand. Abby Johnson says this. When she worked at Planned Parenthood, they didn't want people to know that their appointments dropped by 75% when they had people outside praying.
Wow.
And just their presence alone in praying, not holding up the signs, not being all crazy, but just praying. And we think prayer is like, that's the best you can do. 75%. And she was in one of the mega, abortion clinics, and they did not want them to know how much they were affecting that facility. That facility ended up being closed down. So, I think that the church just needs to educate your congregation. And maybe it's not on a Sunday morning, maybe it's a class. And you invite someone like myself or someone who's educated on the history of Planned Parenthood, the different abortion procedures. Because I'm like, do you know what actually happens in these the first trimester, second trimester, and third trimester abortions? Because there are second and third trimester abortions. And these girls are in the hospital for like 4 days. It's barbaric what they do to these babies in order to kill them in their mother's wombs. So I don't even think, I'm like, if we could show them, like give you a window into what's actually, people would go ballistic with what they're doing to these babies. And now live action, I'm sure you probably heard Lila Rose.
Rose. Yeah.
They just came out with the emails that were leaked. And this is very graphic, but that the USFC, I think that's the initials, leaked emails that they were using the aborted babies' clitorises, testicles, and penises for research. So don't tell me that they're just a bunch of cells. Why are you harvesting these babies that have been murdered from abortion? It's so, I mean, that's demonic. Horrifying. And that's just like the tip of the iceberg. Why are they doing research on these aborted babies like this? If they're saying they're not human, they're not really babies, then why are you taking their hearts? Why are you taking their kidneys? And getting so much money from it? I mean, right in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, they were harvesting them. So I'm like, it's so grotesque and barbaric what they're doing to these babies. And just because you can't hear them doesn't mean that they're not in pain. They can feel pain at 20 weeks. So, I mean,
I thought it was actually earlier than that. I thought it was
it might be 18 actually. I've heard 18, between 18 and 20 weeks.
You know, what else is interesting? You started talking about the second and third trimester abortions and everything. Have you seen, it was a couple of years ago now, I think it was about 5 years ago maybe, a British TV show where they were doing an interview with a woman who said, basically, if my child was in pain and suffering from something, I should have every right to take a pillow and smother them and put them out of their misery, because that's what a loving mother would do.
Oh my!
I mean, when we talk about the slippery slope of where things lead to, it's like, well, what is the difference between a baby that's 2 days away from being born and a baby that's 2 days after birth, right? Not much.
Right.
Except for not being connected anymore, right? So ethically, if you're on that side of the line, what is the moral deficiency of smothering that baby if you decide, you know what, this is going to be a drain on my finances, because that is seriously one of their reasons for when they're in the womb.
Right.
It's just
and
insanity.
I've never seen a woman's financial means change because she aborted her child. And and I get so frustrated when the pro-choice side will say, well, what are you doing about adoption? What are you doing about, foster care system? This, what are you doing? Like, you're not, it's the pro-life movement that is affecting all of those things. We're the ones with over 2,000 crisis pregnancy centers. We're the ones giving out the diapers, the formula. We're the ones with the maternity homes. We're the ones, throwing baby showers for these girls and raising money for them and giving them scholarships so they can finish school. You call Planned Parenthood and tell them you want to keep your baby. Tell me what they're going to give to you. They're definitely not going to give you any prenatal care, and they're definitely not going to give you diapers or any kind of help. They're going to say, all we offer is abortion and, hormones for you to change, your sex. I mean, that's it.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I do think that there's a nugget of truth in that statement from them about what are you doing about the adoption and stuff like that. Here's the thing. I think that they're shifting the focus of blame. Right?
Oh yeah.
Why are you against this if you're not doing this, which really has little connection? My answer is always, you're absolutely right. Why can't we work on both of those systems at the same time? Why can't we reduce or eliminate abortions while also improving the adoption foster care system? Because obviously there's an abundance of children in those systems, but financially, it's really hard for couples to access those systems if they don't have the financial means to. Why would a couple spend tens of thousands of dollars on a child when they could use that tens of thousands of dollars towards raising the child? Mm-hmm. So they have to weigh those options before they even make that choice. What should really be happening is, if you're going to talk about government subsidies for anything, it should be, hey, allocate tens of thousands of dollars for this adoption. We'll put it into some sort of escrow account that you can draw from for education and food and everything else for that child to raise it. To show that you're being a responsible parent. Like, there are ways that we can work on these two systems at the same time.
But the other thing is, it's only the pro-life movement that is being told you got to fix everything outside of the womb. You don't say that to, Breast Cancer Society. Are you telling them to cure every type of cancer? No, you tell them to stay in their lane. This is what they're supposed to do. This is their specialty. Our job is to abolish abortion. We don't have to fix every single ail in society in order for a child to be born, because their value in their worth is not determined by money, or if they have Down syndrome, or if they have, they want them to come into this perfect society when that's not going to happen. I mean, is your life perfect? They're like, well, it'd be easier if they didn't have to go into a foster care system, but we don't know the outcome. We're not God. You don't know what's going to happen after they're born. That could be, but that's not always the case. And so I think that they are just using that as an excuse, just like they bring up rape and incest, when that's like 1% of the 99% that are having abortions because it's an inconvenience for them.
I am one of 29 family members now that wouldn't be here if my grandfather had been aborted because of him being born of a rape.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You also said something about Down syndrome too, which I find interesting. A couple years ago, I think it was maybe 2 years ago at this point, Iceland, I believe it was, came out
no more
and
Down
said
syndrome.
that no more Down syndrome, 0% Down syndrome birth rate, because they were aborting every single one.
Yep.
And they were proud of that statistic. That is some demonic working right there.
My brother used to live there, and my mom went there to visit him, and she just said, it is so dark there, just like empty. Like there's just it just seems like there's no life there. So beautiful things, but
Right,
spiritually, it just seems very dead there. So
I only have a little time with you. I'm already running this interview kind of late for you at night,
Yeah.
so I don't want to take up too much of your time. But since we did take up the bulk of it with I think what is the most important stuff that you're doing, do you mind if we just finish on a couple thoughts on some other topics that you seem to be involved in? Number one, you outright said in your original story, very lightly touched upon it, that the original intent of Planned Parenthood was to basically eradicate Black individuals. I mean, that was Margaret Sanger's goal.
Yeah.
Not only minorities, but the mentally inferior, what we're talking about with the mentally handicapped. I mean, they said to basically use these clinics as a cleansing technique for society.
And so, I mean, her famous line is, "We don't want word to get out that we want to eliminate the Negro population." And it's happening. I mean, abortion is the number one killer in the Black community, more than Black on Black crime, police brutality, guns, drugs, alcohol, any heart disease, any of it, even combined. Planned Parenthood kills in 2 weeks what took the KKK 1 century to kill. So if we don't get it together, if we don't stop aborting our babies the way that we are, we're literally going to be endangered. We're not going to exist. That's how serious this is.
Prevalent, yeah. I know that you had met my wife through educational type circumstances and everything. Yeah. You both had at one point in time been involved in a well, she still is a group called Classical Conversations, which when I listen to my 7-year-old talk about things, it makes me feel stupid. So it's very high level education stuff.
It is. It is. Awesome.
So you had gotten out of that about the year before she got into it, but somehow you guys met, I guess, at your house for a pool party or something. And so she's been talking about you for a while. Let me just say that. Sweet. And so you're going kind of through this system right now. You at that point in time put your kids into a Christian school. You just mentioned that now they're back into the public school sphere.
Yeah.
Tell me what your thoughts are right now. One of the big hot topics out there is critical race theory. Okay. And I think that there seems to be a lot of confusion, most likely on both sides, from maybe on my side thinking that it's a bad thing being uneducated on what it actually is.
Yeah.
And on the other side, by people saying, well, we're not actually teaching critical race theory in schools. But when you look at the tenets of what critical race theory is, they're dropping those nuggets of topics into the daily subjects, basically.
Right.
So what are your thoughts? I'm just reaching out to people and just asking.
Well, I think it's whether my kids were homeschooled or obviously homeschooling is the greatest way of knowing exactly what your child is learning. Christian school, you still got to kind of understand, what are they teaching? Because they could still be dropping it in there too. And obviously public school, I'm very involved with what my children are learning. So I'll be going to school board meetings, and I will be making sure my children are learning what's appropriate. But I also know that I can't just advocate for my own kids. I need to advocate for all kids that are not being advocated for. And critical race theory is, if you look at really the roots of it, it's really teaching white kids that you're just racist because you're white, and teaching Black kids to be victims, that you can never make it in this society, which is horrible. They're teaching them to look at each other based on their skin color rather than character. And my kids are biracial. So I'm like, what are they, half oppressed and half free? What, are they going to look at their mom and say, I'm the victim and their dad is the oppressor? No, I refuse to have my children learning that. And they know about Black Lives Matter. They know about CRT, and I'm just very intentional about teaching them the truth so that when that comes up, they know what to say, if it does. But I will be going to our school board meetings and getting the curriculum, and you just have to be on it. You can't just assume, as I live in a very conservative area, but I still cannot just assume they're not going to teach this. A lot of the older teachers are retiring. And so it makes me nervous because then the younger teachers are coming in, and I don't know if they're, even if they might not be in the curriculum, the teachers individually could be trying to teach it in the classroom. So I'm willing to pull my kids out too, because we go kind of year by year and pray about what we should be doing with our kids. So I'm not opposed to pulling them out of public school. Right now, they had a very good year. They still say the Pledge of Allegiance. They still honor, very conservative area, which we love. So they had a very good year, minus the mask, but right. Minus that. But, you just have to be on it. If you're going to be a parent and be involved. And it's not up to the teachers to really teach my children. Like, I'm their parent. I get to decide what they get to learn and what I don't want them learning. So, that's the kind of parent that
the teachers union would disagree with you right now.
I know. And they're just going to have to.
I don't know if you saw that, but yeah, they basically just said that teachers are the ones that decide what the kids learn. And
last
like
time
my
I
wife
checked,
said,
they did not birth my children. So.
Well, like my wife said, there's truth to that. They do decide what your kids learn. And that's why parents need to be involved.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be what you want them to learn. Mm-hmm. And I'm so thankful that you have the foresight to go and attend these school board meetings, because I was appointed to and elected to our local school board at one point in time. And the most upsetting thing to me as a school board member is every week looking out at an empty audience and seeing that there were no parents that wanted to get involved in their kids' education. And the only time that those parents did show up is when we had a final vote after talking months about something, that we were going to vote on something, and then they all show up and protest. Well, where the heck were you for the last couple months?
The whole time. Yeah.
Yep. So maybe school board member in your future?
Maybe that might happen. That may happen. I would not be surprised.
Yeah. You got a full plate as it is, though. You're already a superhero in the community. Well, listen, I really appreciate it. I wanted to keep this to about an hour, which we did. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that there's so much more that you and I could talk about. And maybe as things happen within the sphere of the pro-life movement, maybe some things that happen in the Supreme Court level, at the state level and everything, as things come up, if I'd love to reach out to you again and get your opinions on some of the things.
Yeah, I would love that. That would be great.
Well, as I said before, too, it's been months of anticipation waiting for this interview with you. So I really appreciate it. The one thing I keep on forgetting for people, so I need to make sure I do it with you today, is if people are interested in getting more information about you and your work, where can they find how to reach you and, any social media pages or anything?
Yeah, if they want me to speak at any events, you can go to Toni McFadden, TONI, McFadden.com, and there you can reach me for any events. I do banquets or, youth groups, anything like that. Social media, Facebook, Toni McFadden, and Instagram, Toni McFadden 12.
Awesome.
I stay off Twitter.
I appreciate you coming. Yeah. Well, if you're on it, you're getting kicked off anyway at this point.
I know. So. I definitely would have got kicked off by now.
Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on, and thank you for everything that you do. Our family is certainly praying for you and your continued ministry to all the communities and everything. And we just pray that you touch people's hearts and continue to do the Lord's work in this area. So.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So thank you again for joining us. And if you're interested, you could always find Whiskey Tango Life podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I am on Twitter, and YouTube as well, where you can find the video. Also, the podcast I use Anchor, which is through Spotify. So you can actually find me on multiple platforms. So just search for the Whiskey Tango Life podcast and subscribe to it on whatever audio platform that you're on. And we'll catch you on the next one. Have a great night, and God bless America.